So we've developed 2 additional resources to support teachers in using Megawatt in the classroom. These are the teacher guide, which sort of gives you the structure of the lesson, how long it will take, how to set up the lesson, that kind of thing, and also some interactive instructions. So these are what you would use in the class to teach the whole class how to play Megawatt at the same time. So this video is going to go through those resources together. So starting with the teacher guide, we'll kick things off with kind of an overview on how to structure the lesson. So imagining we've got about 60 minutes, this is how we would structure it. So we've got around about 5 minutes to set up, 5 minutes for an introduction to the game, 10 minutes to play the build phase, around 20 to 25 minutes to play the event phase, and leaving time at the end for discussion and tidy away. Now, if you've got different lengths of time to play it in, we can kind of adjust, I would say, mainly adjust the event phase. You can have a little bit longer to play the event phase, and a little bit longer for the scoring and discussion. So you can typically, I'd say an hour is probably, 50 to 55 minutes is probably the minimum, and you can go all the way up to about an hour and a half for this activity. If you want to go any longer, you probably want to introduce more around the discussion phase and have a bit, or even play 2 games. So, setting up the room, we want to arrange the room so we've got about 3 to 5 students per table. 4 would be kind of perfect, up to about 8 tables because you'll typically have 8 games to play, and have these tables separate from each other and facing one another. So ideally you have 2 on one side and 2 on the other, facing one another. It's a good idea to keep the tables separate just to avoid any crossovers with the cards within the game. Makes it a lot easier at the end to pack away. Then you want to put a Megawatt on each table. Then you want to set up the projector with the instructional slides ready to show the class how to play. So we split the section for playing in 3 with the introduction to the game, the build phase and the event phase. So this is where you'll start using the interactive instructions. So I'm going to introduce you to these slides and how you would go about using them. So the interactive instructions are up on the slide, and if we kind of go through them, you'll see that it starts off with a contents page. So these are interactive, so you can kind of look at different sections and click back to the home page. So for example, if I was to click on the technology cards, it gives you an overview of all the technology cards, the different stats that you have on them, and at any point you can go back to the home page. So you can do that. If you wanted to retouch on anything that you've kind of gone over, you can do that. But what I would typically do is run through the slides just using the arrows. So they're already in an order that's useful, but you've always got that home page interaction in case you want to go over something. So to start with the introduction, so this is where we want to introduce the 4 different card types, so you can kind of run through the slides and introduce those card types. Let the kids pick up the cards, have a look through them, maybe talk through the different cards that they can see and read out some of the facts that are on the cards. Maybe they can, get them comfortable with what cards are on the table, and then get them to set it up in the middle of the table, like so, running through these slides. Then it's just a little overview on how to win. So you want to remind the players that it's your highest power and your lowest impact. Next, it will introduce the technology cards again, just to make sure that they've understood the power, the impact and the coin aspects. And then it will move on to a demonstration of the build phase. So as you can see here, there's a sort of interactive display on how to play, and it runs through 2 rounds. So you can just click the next arrow and talk through what's happening. So they've drawn 4 cards, they've spent 5 coins, and then they've decided whether or not to keep the extra card. Now, I think it's always a useful idea to run through this and then demonstrate it in person, do the rounds as well, so they've seen both on the screen and you doing it. And once you've done that, you do that twice just to show that there's 2 rounds. And then finally, there's a little summary of the rules. So it's just going over all the details on how to play it. And then it says, let's play 2 rounds. So what I would do is I'd leave this slide up on the presentation so they can all see this information. And now everybody plays 2 rounds of the build phase. So you want everyone to have 2 turns. And once they're done, raise their hand or kind of go around and see how people are getting on. So we want everyone to finish the build phase at the same time. And that typically would take, maybe about 5 minutes. We'll then move on to the event phase. So Before the event phase starts, we kind of go over what the upgrades, actions and events do. So again, if you just carry on through the arrows on the slides, it will go through that. And it's worth spending a little bit of time just making sure that they understand the different types of upgrades that you can have. And here are some examples of these. Remember, there's 4 main types. You've got your technology upgrades to double the power. You've got energy storage technologies that increase your amount of money. You have carbon capture that reduces the impact of biomass, coal and gas. And then you have interconnector, which allows you to draw more cards. So that's a good way of kind of showing the different cards that you have available. And next we want to go through the actions. So kind of have a look through what the different kind of actions are and remind them on the draw mechanics for that, which will be reminded here at the end as well. And finally, the event cards. So there's a little introduction to how the event cards work. And like before, it does a demonstration of the event phase. So again, I would do this in person with them as well. So run through it, do 1 round, show them how it works. Do it again in person with your cards in front of you. And then again, it will give you the summary of the event phase rules. So kind of go through them one at a time, leave it up on the screen, and now is when you want to start the event phase. So this is where everyone will kind of be let loose and start playing. Typically you want this to be 20 to 30 minutes in length, allow them to get some nice rounds in and it starts to really get used to how to play. What I would say is set a time, maybe about 20 minutes before the end of the lesson or 15, to say this is when you finish and this is when you start to score the game. When you get near the end of it, that's when you want to bring out this final scoring slide, just to remind everyone how they score their grid. So we've come to the end of the playing time, so we've just done all the scoring and everyone's got their scores and all the kids are animated because there's some losers, there's some winners. And now we just kind of come to the final parts of the session. So this is when we want to really talk about how people have scored and a little discussion round. So score the grids and be aware that each table will have probably played a different number of rounds. So it's difficult to compare table to table, so you want to keep comparisons relatively within each table. And we want to ask some questions. So for example, some of the discussion points we might have are: what helped the winner get the best score? What event cards came up that helped or hindered the grid? Were there any upgrades that did the same, or any actions that affected the game? Did they change their strategy at any point during the game? Did something happen that they made them think, oh, I need to do something differently? And what would they do differently next time if they play again? These are kind of starter questions to get the conversation going. And maybe we can ask some more specific ones about technologies, if there's anything they learnt about a specific technology or an upgrade or an event. And then you can really kind of develop this further and talk about things like countries. So do you think there are specific events that affect certain countries more? Or what does your grid look like in comparison to the UK grid, etc. So there's lots of different ways that we can kind of analyse it further and talk about the results of the game. So when you've got about 5 minutes left to the end of the lesson, it's probably a good idea to start tidying up. And it'll be useful to gather some quick feedback, raise of hands of, who enjoyed playing Megawatt. Did you learn something new about energy? Would you consider a career in energy, that kind of thing? Because that'll be very helpful to kind of give you an idea of how it went. And if you have time and you'd like to, there is a feedback form that takes about 5 minutes to complete, which is really helpful for us to understand how well the session went, how we could improve it. So yeah, we'll provide a link for that as well. And I think that's pretty much the run through on how to play it in the lesson. I hope that was useful and I hope you enjoy using it.